Welcome to the Ecom Ops podcast. My name is Simon. I'm here joined today with my co-host Dayu and Greg Lepkoff. This podcast is all about your supply chain from China. And we as Ecom Ops decided to really focus on the fulfillment and moved away more and more from the sourcing for good reasons. Sourcing is a complete different game for DTC brands. Finding a product in China is easy, but you also not only compete with AliExpress, but you're actually competing with players like Temu as well. You're basically forced to customize, brand, and develop your product and offering. For that reason, we have a guest speaker. Tune in, listen, and like and share if you like it as well. And then I hope you enjoy the episode. Very pleased today to have a guest speaker. Our first guest of the Ecom Ops podcast is an honor. It's a great partner of ours from Kanary Solutions. We have Greg Lepkoff. Welcome to the
Uh,
show, man.
thanks. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
This is really cool to have us actually teaming up on this podcast, but also outside of this podcast, because your focus for the last probably 12 years, correct me if I'm wrong, you have been sourcing from China. And just like me, you actually, China has become a part of your life. Can you share a little bit more on how you grew into the role you're playing now?
Yeah, sure. So when I was graduating college around 2008, I was like an East Asian Studies major, mainly so I could just write papers and not take tests. But from when I graduated, I moved out to China, lived with a Chinese family, got fluent in the language. I always wanted to do business, and I just didn't know like which area to fall into. So when I moved out there, I was just working with like a lot of different types of companies and seeing like how I could be like a bridge between like the US and China. And I kind of just fell into sourcing and helping companies in the US manufacture products in China. So I lived in China for a total of 10 years. And now I go there, of course, for my work now a couple times a year. And we have an office and everything in Shenzhen, and built a really solid team. So now we're sourcing primarily for e-commerce D2C brands.
So can you share a little bit more about Canary Solutions? You're based in the US, but obviously it's not just you, right? There's a whole team and structure built around the business of sourcing itself.
Correct. My partner John McDougall and I we manage the clients, and then we have our partner Jerry, who's in China. He manages our account reps. So we have two teams in China. One is doing manufacturer supplier research, and then the other team is managing our clients more on the day to day side. So like just like confirming details of designs, packaging, lead times, and just like getting them as ready as possible to place their orders, but also trigger them about stuff that's ongoing with their order and things of that nature. And then we have our operations in the Philippines just to handle a lot of order tracking, inventory tracking, shipment updates for the clients that we're doing bulk shipping to, 3PL providers in the U.S. Of course, with you guys, they're kind of a little bit part of the process for getting shipments over to you.
Hey Greg, so we've known each other for a very long time, and actually, your business structure actually sounds quite similar to how we have it at Ecom Ops. This mixture of having a China team on the ground and also having, not sure it's very obvious, but a Western perspective between you and Simon and myself as well. So before we get into the actual supply chain management of it, I love to kind of hear your experience kind of straddling the Chinese business culture and Western business expectations as well, and how you've navigated that with your business.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think from living in China for as long as I have, one of my main focuses on um, like living there and learning the language. I was also learning the culture, which required me to really just be a sponge. Just do the partying when you're supposed to party with them, meaning like have drinks with them, smoke cigarettes with them. I mean, building a relationship. That's what like that was like at the core what it was all about. And then when I started sourcing, I kind of had some of those that foundation of experience. So now I'm building relationships with my manufacturers, learning about when the right times are to discuss pricing issues or lead time issues, But really, what's like most important about everything is getting that face time with them and being able to work with them and make sure that they're flexible with you, so that when I turn around and deal with the clients in the West, it's easier for me to explain what's going on and be transparent about it. That way, they don't feel like there's gray areas or any kind of game
Yeah,
playing.
that's great. And the reason why I asked that is because before we even talk about any technical aspects of sourcing or fulfillment, I think a fundamental critical element is for someone who is a Western brand, who's more used to that Western culture, to be able to bridge that gap, working with China-based operations, whether it's factories or fulfillment as well. And I will just say that I'm Chinese, but I grew up in the U.S. There's so many fundamental differences between the business cultures between both, and this is something that I've known you for a while, Greg, and I think this is something that both you and I and also Simon are very aware of, that a great sourcing agent, a great fulfillment agent is more around that relationship, and knowing how to navigate on the ground in China, but also knowing how to translate that in the right way and communicate with our mostly Western clients as well.
Let's go into that. Can you just break down maybe the sourcing process in some stages, and like what do you see like as main pitfalls that might arise in these stages? Because it's not just this is what I want and then it's delivered.
Yeah, yeah, no problem. So I'm gonna break it down into 5 areas. The fifth area is kind of the shipping element. So in terms of sourcing, as like a sourcing company, the first stage is always due diligence, right? So the due diligence process, like when a client comes to us about a product that they want us to, help them produce with a manufacturer, we typically speak to about 30 to 50 companies in the industry, that like product niche. And I say companies because when you're doing your due diligence, you actually don't know which are factories and which are trade companies. Or they might be a factory that's producing one product, but offering you another product that they buy from another factory and reselling it to you. So like during this due diligence process, I'd say like that's like kind of one of the pitfalls, is like you don't really know who you're working with. Is it a factory? Is it a trade company? It's very easy for companies on Alibaba to make themselves appear like they're the factory. So that would be like the due diligence aspect of it. Sampling, as you know, like everyone needs to order samples before they place a bulk order. So I would say just like a pitfall with that process is, I mean, first of all, you should always get samples from multiple vendors so that you can compare and contrast quality. But I'd say the big issue is more about like not asking your final candidates you got samples from like enough questions about the samples to see which one can make the most improvements. Sometimes you order samples and maybe one of them had like a I don't know, a scratch, and the other one didn't. So you're choosing like that other product because it didn't have a scratch. But what you don't know is, let's just say it's an electronics product, like they have a better engineering team. They can do more product development for you, or they could handle your customization issues. So sometimes people just like assume things when they look at the product, when they need to be like talking to a company like us to kind of say, hey, like, is this really a big deal, the scratch that was on the electronics product?
So actually, Greg, I want to talk about those first 2 points first because they're quite interesting. Because between Sam and myself, we've had a lot of experience in the dropshipping space. And if you think about like due diligence, or saying, well, even the first step of due diligence, right? Due diligence in traditional dropshipping is what, like finding like 10 different AliExpress links and researching them, right? So even the fact that you're talking about not only looking at 30 to 50 options, or more than 10 even, but like you're literally talking about going to the companies or trade companies or factories themselves. I mean, that's just like a fundamental difference, that I think a lot of drop shippers or like early D2C e-commerce brand owners, you really have to have that kind of mindset if you really want to have the right, either the best quality or the most efficient production for your products as well. And that goes into this idea of sampling, right? It's I remember from my experience with a lot of traditional drop shippers, typically, well, there's no sampling in traditional drop shipping. The sampling comes after the fact. The sampling comes 30 days after you start selling and you finally get your own sample, and that's your sample. And then you figure out like how to fix it if there's something wrong with it. So I just want to chime in, sorry to interrupt. I just want to kind of chime in and just really highlight the contrast that I see from a more established sourcing process for D2C e-commerce brand versus, what I really, really think is a limited approach to traditional dropshipping sourcing.
That's correct. I think the due diligence is key because this is the beginning phase of our relationship building with the manufacturers as well. When we deal with consumer products, we're in Shenzhen, so everybody's in our backyard. So it's kind of quite easy to just do 5 visits in a day with a manufacturer, meet the owners, eat with them, and kind of just know what their capabilities are, understand the brands that they're working with, because sometimes it's important to know, have an idea of it so that you could see like where you would fall on the totem pole, right? Like how much of a priority are you really going to be with the manufacturer? So while doing this due diligence, we really are trying to figure out like what's the right fit for the company based on like the volumes that they'll be purchasing or scaling into, or like should they just be working with a smaller manufacturer and then like scale into another one at a later time because they'll get more like preferential treatment, something like that. Fourth step would just be quality control. I think one of the pitfalls there is that most customers dealing directly with China don't really have like a QC checklist system in place with the supplier. And that's what we have to do day in, day out. We have to make sure that we're getting updates from the manufacturer when materials are coming in, when they're going to start assembly, how are they handling the QC process after. Are they going to be sending us our pictures and videos so we can provide it to the clients? A lot of our D2C brands want the video so they can use it for marketing. So we try to get them as the best possible pictures of either an assembly line, or we have some products that are just more machine made and less of like a manual process. So get them pictures of that so that they could really show that their stuff is getting produced at like a high quality factory. So I'd say like the quality control part, just having a good checklist and having a good process with the manufacturer and like making them work in the system that works best for you on top of their own QC systems is like the perfect recipe for success with them.
Would you recommend to also have an during production quality control? So not just only when the product is finished, but would you send people over already during the production as well to check in if everything's going smooth?
Oh yeah. Like when we're doing skincare products, like we're sending pictures and videos of like the bottles getting made, pictures and videos of the bottles being filled with like skincare products. So yeah, I mean, we try to be proactive with the supplier to provide us like those videos and pictures. It's typically from their phone, but they're kind of used to that. It's surprisingly enough. Like I think they do get asked that by other people as well. So that's just something that we always try to do, just so that they know that their stuff is being made. They know it's being made in a clean place. So yeah, I think it's really valuable to be getting those QC updates during production, not just after.
The thing about quality control is that it's such a integral part of just product quality. So it's important to realize that for the exact same product, even if they use the exact same tooling, the same process, the same materials, if you don't have quality control at all in the extreme, that's where you're going to have quality issues. Every single production line is going to have some rate of quality issues. And the really great factories, the ones that have very strict quality control guidelines, and they're very careful about things, they're the ones where the final product at a much higher rate is going to provide you with the kind of quality that you're actually looking for. So this is actually one of the reasons why I actually suggest that if you're working with a sourcing agent with a factory, you want to be careful not to push them too hard, because like if you try to push them too hard, and Greg, maybe you kind of chime in on this, but sometimes like if you're just kind of forcing them to make that tough decision between timing and putting in the right steps to make sure that it comes out at a high quality, then that's where you're going to have problems, and in a way it's not going to be the factory's fault as well.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think for us, whenever we work with factories, it's all about setting the right expectations. You do have to have a bit of flexibility working within their framework, but during that due diligence process for us, we're striving to find factories that have like top-notch QC systems. That way, we just know like whenever we're asking, like, for example, like if we're scaling up a DTC brand that's going from like 20,000 to 100,000 units, like in those situations we need production schedules. And like anyone that we work with in general, like on the factory side, like they give us that information before we even start the scale, like the client starts the scaling. So it's just important to make sure you're working with quality people, and then you can kind of like work within their system so that you're set up for success. I mean, I think the inquiries we have to do on the QC side, it's really to just make the client feel a lot better and feel like everything is safe. Because it doesn't matter how many times I tell them that it's a top-notch factory, like they still don't know if it is or not. They have no idea. They don't know how the process works. So it's really just more for the client to just like be like, hey, look, like here's some videos and pictures of how they're doing things, and these are their suggestions for trying to do things a little bit faster without sacrificing the quality. And the client typically leaves it in our hands to make the decisions. They just kind of let us know the criteria before an order starts. But yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Okay, good stuff, Greg. So it's basically due diligence, your factory selection slash sampling, you got negotiation, order confirmation, and obviously the quality control. And the last step probably would be the shipping, which obviously is something that we take care of for D2C brands. Obviously, there's always a mix between doing it by boat, by train, sometimes even if it's mainland or close to China, and obviously by air. Definitely, these shipping options are always there, and it really depends what's the best fit. So definitely also something that I would say is part of the sourcing process of knowing how you want it to be shipped out. That's definitely an aspect that is come into play when it comes to sourcing from China as well. You want to do a full container, you want to do in batches, or you want to go it. You want part of it maybe fast by air to a location of your choice. It's definitely something that you need to take care of as like a fifth step to consider. What I would like to know actually from you is you've dealt with so many factories and suppliers, and I always get the people that are dealing with China, they're always wondering like, should I build a relationship? Should I visit the factory? Should I be very strong on the price? What is your take on what works best when dealing with a factory or a supplier?
So it's an interesting question because like they're kind of all connected. For us, or for me, especially like when I was based in China, it's all about establishing a relationship with them. The factories really like it when you're detail oriented but flexible at the same time. They love to be face to face with you. And I think when you are building a strong personal relationship with them, you're going to be able to get into those flexible like pricing discussions or lead time discussions, but more importantly with like a personal relationship with them by meeting with them face to face. They're going to start to give you preferential treatment, or they might even just give you better terms. I have some clients that we were working with them for a year and a half and we get like net 15 terms with them. So like, and then we pass that down to the client because the client, that frees up their cash flow to do more marketing, and they could scale their business. So I think it all starts with the relationship. I think there's nothing wrong with asking about price discounts. Like we do it carefully because like we don't want them to think that we're just trying to get the cheapest possible price or anything like that. But I'd say building a strong relationship, being responsive, keeping them in check at the same time. Like they like to know that you're going to be systematic about things because then they know you're an easy person to deal with. When it comes to dealing with troubleshooting issues, like are you going to come up with solutions with them to work through it? It's not. Sometimes problems are not black and white. So being flexible, having a good relationship, being direct is, I think, the most important part.
Yeah, so great. Let me chime in on that. So back when I was running my own brand, and I'm actually working on some brands right now, I totally agree that that FaceTime, and it's not just the FaceTime itself, but what that actually enables, that their relationship, right? At the end of the day, it can be easy to think that factories are just run like machines, especially if you've never visited one before or you never worked with one directly. They're not just run by machines. There may be machinery, but a lot of the decisions, the production runs are still ran by people. And there's a lot of manual decisions and there's a lot of fluctuations and flexibility that can actually be part of the process itself. And therefore, there can be a lot of leeway. in really pretty much everything. Now, there's obviously limits, right? There's limits on cost, there's limits on lead times, there's limits on capacity, but within those limits, there can be a lot of flexibility. And this is where, even if you as a end client of a factory or sourcing agent, and you may not have the largest orders, but you're the one that's actually there, and you're actually, eating with them, drinking with them, and building that relationship and probably friendship with them as well, then you're going to actually be able to get a lot of things done that you normally would not have, even if you have larger order volumes. And this is probably also a part of just the Chinese business culture or the East Asian business culture. Whether it is good or bad, relationships are very important in Chinese business in general. Now, that doesn't mean that you as a D2C brand needs to be like at a factory all the time, but this is one of the values of actually working with a sourcing agent, someone that can be in the middle, whether it's extension of your team or an agency that you can actually trust to represent you to build and maintain those relationships as well.
100% agree with you. Every time I go to China, it's just so many meetings with factories, and just getting that FaceTime is so valuable. And like you build friendships. I mean, that's the thing with like doing business in China over the years. And I'm sure both of you would agree with this. It's like when you're doing business over there, it's you're like entering their family. Like, I mean, because even a lot of factories that we're all working with are family run operations. So when you build that relationship with them, they're inviting you to their hometown for Spring Festival. I can't begin to tell you how many spring festivals I've had in the countryside with like a factory owner, because they just, we did a lot of business together, and they were like, hey, like you should come to my hometown, and we should drink, and like you should meet all my cousins and relatives, and you're really just like part of their life. And that is so different than the way things are done in the United States and Europe. And I think that's why like I always like want to go back to China, just because like I really love how hospitable like the culture is there. So that would just be my final piece on that.
Yeah, definitely recognize that. It's such when you get into that circle, basically you will never leave. You're not going to leave that circle again. You're part of it. It's not so much of the family is not a real actual biological family. It's whoever touches is influencing your well-being or growth. So it's very powerful to be part of that circle. Definitely. Well, a lot of D2C brands and a lot of people buying from China, they always think, okay, the bigger the order, I need to get lower prices as well. But obviously, there are also some issues that come with getting bigger orders. Means you have to pay much more upfront. How would you say to deal better with these kind of cash flow issues to overcome this?
So since working with D2C brands, I'd say like we've been working heavily with them over the last 2.5 years now, where we primarily just focus on working with them. I think it's all about leveraging that historical sales data and like what the future holds for their month to month volumes, so that you're actually changing the conversation about not about, hey, I'm doing all this business with you, I need to buy this much more so we can get to this price. It's like, no, how about over the next 6 months I'm going to sell 200,000 units or more, and if you're just continuing to produce for us every month, can we just have the 200,000 unit price? And have like, of course that's like done over like dinner meetings and stuff a lot of the time, but like that really is what it's about. Because for my e-commerce clients now, I mean, ones that are doing fulfillment from China, just try to keep a month or less of inventory and just keep that factory churning product out and getting it over to e-commerce, for example. And then we just forecast the purchasing. I mean, of course there's going to be some things that we have to negotiate with the factory, like, hey, like, can you keep more bottles on hand? Or, okay, you kind of need us to produce a little bit more, so can you just keep some inventory at your factory, and then we'll do faster shipping times? Because as long as you're not dealing with like products that have like short expiration dates, which is not very common, then you're able to work with the factory as well. And the factories we work with are so big, they have space. So I think it's just about like trying to find that happy medium between fulfillment companies and the factory, and trying to produce like smaller orders, but still get like the high volume price because you have the sales to back it up.
Yeah, and I'll add to that as well. Is it's there are a lot more variables to consider versus just a simplified view of more equals cheaper. And usually it takes longer as well, right? So when Greg is talking about like maybe investing in more bottles or other raw materials, for example, like that could actually just be a fraction, like a small fraction of total cost that either you're willing just to put a 10% like extra deposit for those materials or the factory just absorbs it for you, right? And the other consideration is how often do you actually need that stock replenishment? So traditionally, if you're talking about old school traditional retail, they're planning 2 to 4 POs per year, and massive POs, right? And it's supposed to last them for at least 3, 4, 5, 6 months. And a lot of traditional factories, they're kind of used to that model, so they kind of come with a standard expectation of that. But that's actually not exactly optimal for how a factory works as well, right? No factory wants to just produce 4 times a year, right? I mean, Greg, I'm sure you agree with that, right? No factory wants to produce just a couple times per year. They have to crunch in order to do that. As a matter of fact, they would actually prefer to well, the other extreme actually, if they could produce the exact same amount every single day and not have to like worry about their capacity going up and down, that's the more ideal. And actually, this is the closer to that ideal is what we see when you're able to compress your lead time. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but that's one of the biggest drivers that we've actually seen. So either you're using air, so you're having like a way faster freight lead time to your local fulfillment warehouse, or more and more brands are just shipping directly from China and being able to have stock arrive at our Shenzhen warehouse in like 2 days or one day or hours sometimes. And what that means is that as opposed to being forced to holding 3, 4 months inventory at a time, they could actually hold 3, 4 days of inventory at a time. And this is kind of what Greg was talking about. Like you might work with the factory to say, hey, I still want like 2 months worth of inventory. However, let's figure out what your production schedule is. And as opposed to taking a month and a half to produce a massive batch, like, does it actually make sense that you're actually producing a much smaller amount every week, every 2 weeks? And that might actually be more optimal for the factory itself.
Yeah, and this ties in back as well, not only just the planning itself of when do you release the goods, but also the packaging. Because if you're gonna make the perfect design of a product that is actually you're shipping air, or you're not, it's not efficiently for an air freight shipment, because everything in the end everything is based on weight. So the alignment on the actual supply as well as the efficiency and the optimization on cost. Placing a bigger order doesn't necessarily create a healthier cash flow situation, as well as the most optimal supply chain that you could have, as well as sometimes a discount can be in other areas just by being more efficient on your packaging, on the actual weight of the product, as well as the timing on when do you actually get shipments released, and the payment terms. This is exactly what you said, right? You are negotiating on behalf of clients, and whenever you get better terms, you replicate that back to them, and everyone wins in that sense.
It's funny you say that, Simon, because like we were just having this conversation, you and me, last week with one of our clients, right? How we needed to figure out like what is a cost saving solution for the client by making the packaging smaller so it could fit into mailboxes. That way, not only is he reducing some of his packaging cost, but he's also reducing his shipping cost. And it's funny you bring it up because like we were just discussing like our plan of attack after Chinese New Year this year, like taking care of that. So you're right. You're right. And this is why like working with you guys like it is just so key because you guys are able to advise us as like the sourcing agent, dimensions and how to make certain weights work just so that it's more optimal for the client on the shipping side.
I'll chime in there. I'll chime in there as well because I have a lot of omnichannel experience. So thinking about retail displays, for example, and this is where the packaging needs to be really considered. How you're actually going to sell it and how you're going to physically fulfill it. A lot of factories for certain product lines, skincare is a good example actually. They're more optimized for retail display. I was actually just at a skincare factory that I mean I was with your team Greg, at the skincare factory in Suzhou, and we were asking, so how are you going? Like, what is the outside box? We're looking at bottles and tubes, and they were like, we don't even think about that. Like our clients don't even ask about like what the box actually looks like. And I realized though, because the bulk of their clients are actually primarily producing for wholesale retail, and we where the box doesn't really matter as much as like the display of the tube itself, right? However, as more, like, let's take skincare as an example, as more and more skincare brands go D2C, you're going to actually require to consider what is the right packaging actually for D2C shipping. And if you don't have like hard enough box that looks also nice enough, it's going to break in shipping, and it's going to have like a poor unboxing experience, which is especially critical for something like skincare, who, especially if you're selling at more of a medium to higher price range, they're going to be higher customer expectations of how that package arrives as well. So definitely make sure that you're also thinking about the end customer experience, what physical fulfillment method that you're actually using, and at least consider what type of packaging is actually more ideal for your fulfillment strategy, and not just, what seems to be standard in the market.
Totally agree. All about the unboxing experience when it comes to being an e-commerce business.
Yeah, so we're teaming up. We're really teaming up together, Ecommerce and Kanary Solutions. It is actually what we're doing is build an ecosystem around, at least in our case, around the fulfillment. So you will see many more of our partners on the podcast as well. But sourcing is so key that it needs focus and attention. And you can see the nuance already in our discussion when it comes to packaging, available supply, building up that relationship, and actually getting benefits out of that relationship. That's not something that a warehouse is built for, to be able to also add that service on top. That's why we work with the best industry experts to help not only us, our clients, but also the industry to bring them up to the next level. And I don't know, is there anything you would like to share, maybe Dayu or Greg, about what would be the benefits that we see for brand owners, the way we are approaching our corporation?
So let me answer that first from my point of view. So ecom ops, when we first started, it was really meant to be that next step from dropshipping. So at the start, many years ago, we also authored some simple sourcing services as well. Now, and since quite a few years ago, we've really shifted towards focusing our entire focus on just fulfillment itself, and not actually acting as a more complex sourcing agent. And the reason, from my point of view, is fundamentally there's such a huge difference from how a very efficient sourcing company should be set up versus a very efficient warehouse or 3PL fulfillment center should be set up. For us, and I'll speak about our experience first, and I'll let Greg share the sourcing piece. For ecom ops, everything has to be optimized around extremely high volume, high accuracy per package, a lot of integrations and technology to make sure that we can just move relatively simple pieces of work at a very high volume as fast as possible, and just get it out the door on a daily basis. And we just simply are not set up to have the capabilities to have very deep, very complex conversations with the factories themselves. And, this is where I personally think it's actually impossible to be great at both sides of the spectrum. So I say this because, especially if you're currently working as a dropshipper, or you're currently working with a dropshipping agent who kind of does both, and you think that that is an easier way of doing things, I would just tell you that it's easier, probably, right? But it's certainly not nearly as efficient as you could be, especially as you're scaling up your brand and you wanted things to be more efficient. And I'll let Greg talk about like the sourcing piece of the equation.
Yeah, I mean, Tayo, I think you're totally right. You really need to have like your sourcing specialist on the manufacturing side, and then you need your fulfillment specialist on the shipping side. And what I see a lot with DTC brands is a lot of the clients that come over to us, they're a successful drop shipping business, and they're primarily working with like what you would call a shipping agent, and they're having their shipping agent source the product and ship the product. And like one of the problems with that is it gives the shipping agent way too much control. and it's also allowing them to pad the prices on the sourcing too high. We've seen shipping agents pad prices on the sourcing side by upwards of 40%, sometimes as high as 50%. And then they're also shipping the product too and making their profits. So with a drop shipping e-commerce store coming over to us, we're giving them more control over the manufacturing. We are also talking directly with the manufacturers, whereas shipping agents may just be buying from a reseller or just some factory that they chose. And working with e-com ops, what's been so great is we're saying, hey, we're going to focus on your product. And then on the back end, we're going to be two companies under one roof handling getting it over to the warehouse and making sure they can tackle all your shipping needs. So I think even just this tool that we're launching where we're tracking sales and inventory and being able to forecast future purchasing, that really allows us and ecom ops to like work together as like this cohesive unit to help e-commerce brands make better purchasing decisions that are going to free up their cash flow. So I think there's a lot of ways in our collaboration that's helpful to the DTC brand. And also, we're now giving them more control over their back end operations. They may not realize it, but they do have a lot more control because we know how to tackle price in our area, just like how ecom ops is going to know how to tackle price in the shipping area. Kind of just like what we were talking about with that client that Simon and I were talking about last week, where we're trying to reduce not just the packaging cost, but the shipping cost by making it smaller.
Let me just take a step back and just look a little bit from a bigger picture because the industry has been changing. You as a sourcing guy, you have also been changed more from B2B to focus on D2C, working with D2C brands. In the industry is changing as well. Temu is coming, Shein is there. Well, they're both there already. But how is it then possible for D2C brands to compete with players that have a sophisticated sourcing network, have the shipping, have the supply chain, and you as a standalone D2C brand have to find your space? What will be your angle on how they can compete? I think on both your angles will be cool and interesting to hear. So, Greg, maybe you can start up.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think Temu and Shein, like, they have a different target market. They're selling a lot of like ancillary products, or just like if it is electronics, it's like simple. They're being challenged to customize their products, improve their products, and try to sell higher value products too. That way, they can they can increase their AOV or just their profit margin in general. So I think what's really important and what I'm seeing with a lot of D2C brands is they're starting to look at products that have like high customer retention rates so that they can build this loyal customer base where they can now start to sell these accessories that you would see on Temu as like an upsell or cross sell. And they're just going to easily add it to the cart because they're just always going to that brand to buy the moisturizer from them, or it's like a supplement product or something like that. So I think the way to really compete with them is to build a loyal customer base that's going to keep coming back to you. That way you're able to start selling those knickknacks that you're seeing on Temu and Shein, and you're still able to sell it for similar prices, right? But now you're buying it as a bundle with something, so you're capturing that profit margin that you need for those like accessory ancillary type of products.
Yeah, so I'm gonna be a little bit blunt here, and I would say that if you're seriously in trouble of Shein or Temu out competing you, then you're probably not actually running a DTC brand. And the brand is the critical part here. I mean, you might think you're running D2C. I mean, you're selling directly to customer, right? But if you're doing that without the actual brand element, then yes, your pie is going to be eaten by Shein or by Temu. Like I almost guarantee that actually over the long run, if that's all you're doing, because then you're just kind of selling the same stuff that they're going to be selling. Temu is like the world's dollar store, right? It's the world's like Walmart private label products, right? So that's what they are. Now, not everyone's buys dollar store stuff, right? Like we buy Apple phones, we buy stuff. We buy from brands that we actually trust. We buy products from brands that we actually engage with. And now, but a big part of that actually is not just the logo or the front end marketing, but it's actually, well, it's everything that you have associated with that customer and what is your brand relationship with them. Now, it depends on your strategy, but a lot of the time, and especially more and more, as Shein and Temu are getting more competitive, It actually means going really deep and actually thinking about how do you actually create a customized experience, not just from marketing, but actually from the products themselves. And not just private labeling, but actually creating and improving on your products. And it's not that difficult, right? Now, creating something completely new is pretty difficult. But if you're taking something that's on the market already and you're actually fundamentally improving it, it's actually not that difficult. And I would actually argue that if you don't do something like that, at least for your core product offerings. Now, obviously, you could do like upsells, cross sells. That's a little bit different to increase your AOV. But if you don't have like some kind of uniqueness in your core product offering, then you don't really have a brand. And I'll just be blunt again. Like this is where the next couple of years, if you don't actually do something like that, then yes, you're probably not going to compete with someone like Temu.
Yeah, I really second that. I think the days of owning a store brand as like a D2C e-commerce company are kind of ending because of them. So I really do second what you're saying about building a stronger brand. You know, like let's just take a red light therapy device, for example, or IPL hair removal device. Like, you know, like those types of products, like you're not going to see on Shein or Temu because first of all they're high value ticket items, and second of all you need like FDA certificates and like 510K certificates to be able to import the product. So being able to, you know, find the right product that is unique in the market that you're not seeing a lot of people sell so that you could appear unique and you're not creating something from scratch, you're white labeling it, but you're seeing that nobody else is really selling it. You know, that's definitely an easier way for you to penetrate the market and be unique. And then you're building this strong brand like what you're saying, Dayu, and then trying to get into those ancillary products as like, you know, upsells, cross sells, and increasing that AOV so that you could be, you know, profitable on those smaller products as well.
Yeah, the game has changed, and there might be some more changes even in the game coming. I would say, I know China is the factory of the world, but we also see, and probably you see as well, there's a shift in China where some of the production is moving maybe to Southeast Asia. There's always the question of, is that a threat? Is that an opportunity? Do you have any take on how that would end up, or how this game is now being played?
So, with traditional businesses we work with, uh, we have come across a lot of this, you know, shifting production over to Southeast Asia. You have like a lot of Chinese factories that are setting up factories over there, but the problem I'm seeing is it's really just the large companies that are getting access to that production because in Southeast Asia it's quite difficult to be doing like small batch orders for like D2C brands, for example. And also, it depends on the industry. Like Malaysia is getting bigger and bigger in consumer electronics, but they still need to import a lot of the materials from China to be able to complete some of the production. So I think overall, like Southeast Asia will continue to be a player. I do think it's more with larger scale production of things, like take clothing, like it's going to be contract manufacturing to like Nike and stuff versus some D2C brand that needs to produce 500 or 1,000, you know, t-shirts type of thing. And then I'm sure you guys can speak to this as well. The fulfillment from those countries, like that setup is not even close to it as advanced as it is in China. So I think it's a bit of ways from an SMB trying to produce stuff in Southeast Asia right now.
Yeah, actually, I actually just had a friend who started a backpack brand and decided to produce from Vietnam because of the lower cost. And he got killed by freight costs. So basically, all of the cost savings that he had were essentially just completely nullified because of the additional supply chain costs of actually getting out of Vietnam. So yeah. So I mean, regardless what it is, I mean, either it's this decision or really anything else in the supply chain. One one suggestion I have everyone is don't think about cost in a vacuum. Don't just look at production costs. Don't just look at logistics costs, packaging costs. Like you have to consider everything all together, and also consider against your balance sheet risk. You know, how much cash are you getting tied up? considered all these financial levers together. And many times you'll actually see that just by optimizing like one tiny little area of your production or supply chain, you're actually potentially damaging or slowing down other areas. And at a net basis, it could actually be worse.
Very awesome. That's really really interesting. So regarding the this episode, what do you want the listener to remember after this episode? What do you think would be? Do you want people to have their perspective on sourcing from China?
I think there's two points. I would say the first point, this would be more for the drop shippers. I think working with shipping agents is dangerous for them handling your sourcing and fulfillment at the same time, because they have a lot more control over your pricing. They, in a way, they become kind of inflexible with helping you develop products as a result. The other piece that I have is for e-commerce businesses that are already set up and working with fulfillment companies. I'd say the big takeaway goes back to what I was saying about the due diligence is really make sure that you are working directly with the manufacturer. So you're set up for like a long-term relationship with them. The last thing you really want to know or find out, and this happens a lot with our clients, is that you were working with a trade company this entire time and you weren't really building any kind of relationship with the actual factory. So I would say that's like the other big piece to walk away from, is making sure you know who you're working with.
Dario, what do you take away from this
Yeah,
episode?
so I would like everyone to take away that there is an actual supply chain that you should be aware of or managing, and depending on what stage of the business you are. So if you're a drop shipper, realize that there is a lot that actually happens, that there is actually a supply chain that you should be aware of, and you should actually be thinking about breaking your supply chain into steps as well. Even if you're more advanced, like if you're a D2C e-commerce brand already, and maybe you actually work with a sourcing agent, maybe you have contacts with factories already, realize that there are a lot deeper nuances, a lot more drivers, a lot more complexity in a good way, I think, that you can actually affect if you build that strong relationship with your supply chain, understand that there is a lot of flexibility, that not everything is robotic, and being able to work with your suppliers or with your sourcing agent or factory directly to figure out more creative solutions that you can partner together to actually achieve mutually beneficial goals for both your brand and also your suppliers as well.
Awesome, awesome. For me, it's really the bigger companies get bigger, the smaller get smaller. So you have to focus somewhere. And for us, so focusing on sourcing or focusing on pure fulfillment, that's where you're gonna excel. At least that's my opinion. Thank you so much, Greg, for joining us. Thank you, Dari, for being here as well. Thank you, listeners. Hope to see you on the next one. Thank you so much for listening to the Ecom Ops podcast. It was a pleasure having you here today. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow this podcast. This was awesome. About sourcing from China is crucial for any D2C brand buying from China. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you have tons of takeaways. If you do, please do let us know. Feel free to reach out to Greg or Ecom Ops itself. Hope to see you on the next one.